So tell me a little bit more about this whole IAF selection process. So one is the selection process, and I'm guessing that must have been seeing it on LinkedIn or someplace, and then applying, and then screening. All of that is there. But do you have a choice on which department you pick?
एंड देन इवन द गाय वो जो पार्किंग वाला वो पूछ रहा है सर आपका डेजिग्नेशन क्या है? क्योंकि उनको तो वही पता है यार ये जॉइंट डायरेक्टर है कि डायरेक्टर बिकॉज उस तरह से आपको वो रिस्पेक्ट देंगे वहाँ रूम्स भी चाय भी सब कुछ उस लेवल पे आपको चाय कौन से कप में मिल रही है उस पर भी फर्क पड़ता है राइट गवर्नमेंट कैन सीम वेरी स्लो बट व्हेन इट वांट्स टू डू समथिंग इट्स मच फास्टर देन द प्राइवेट सेक्टर बिकॉज इट हैज इमेंस अमाउंट ऑफ रिसोर्स.
What is some advice that you would give to people when they are in that phase where you were, let's say 2015, 2016, 3, 4 years before you made the final switch?
That's where you have to spot the opportunity. You can look, and again, not saying that I've done it many times, but I can tell you this is the right time to get into AI training. I see left, right, and center AI training being offered.
Hello, Namaskar. Thank you for joining us on Impactful Journeys. In today's episode, we welcome back Ravi Trivedi. Ravi has had a long, illustrious career in the corporate sector and around 4 years ago switched to the social sector. Now, senior talent switching to the social sector from the corporate side is a much discussed and debated topic. And today we have the opportunity to touch upon some of these angles with Ravi from his lived first-hand experience. And so we want to really talk about that. Also, since his switch to the social sector, Ravi has worked closely with the government departments as part of the Nudge Institute's Indian Administrative Fellowship Program. And so we want to talk about Ravi's experience there as well in working with government, the challenges, the myths, and the gratification. Ravi has also worked on problems in the agriculture value chain from a livelihoods lens and on leveraging AI for livelihood challenges. And so these are topics that come up quite a lot. And so we want to talk about those as well. So Ravi, a lot to talk about. Thank you for coming back and giving us your time. How are you doing? Kaise hain aap?
Doing well. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you again for making time. So, just want to know a little bit more about you, and share with the listeners. Just tell us a little bit about your background, your education, and your stint in the corporate career to the time that you made the switch.
Sure. All right. So I grew up in Bhopal. Did my school as well. School there, college there, undergrad in Bhopal. Went on to do a master's from IISc. Post that several years in Hewlett Packard, and then went on to do an MBA. Post MBA was on Wall Street for a few years, working with Bank of America as an equity
Hmm. Hmm.
analyst.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then move into longer term investing with a venture fund. Somewhere around 2011, after that stint, I wanted to come back. And this was a conscious choice, largely due to my family, also due to my desire to do something in the country. I had never filed for green card while I was in US.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I came back. My experience in the venture fund was such that I had to actually go in as a consultant into an operating kind of a role. And
Hmm.
I realized that while investing was great, I loved actually the hands-on. So I wanted to be in the fence than being, be
Hmm.
the coach. I want to
Hmm.
be in the game, I guess, if you may. And so I decided to do startup, build two startups while I came back. The first was more cash flow oriented couponing side. Again,
Hmm.
while I was an investor in the US and in India, I continue to. I
Hmm.
decided to bootstrap. I was always enamored by that journey. And
Hmm.
from that first stint of coupon side that I ran, Coupon Rani, I actually was able to take it to a scale and get some cash flow from it, which helped me build the second SaaS company, which was a push notification SaaS. So
Hmm.
push notification SaaS on the web was new in 2015. We were the early movers. I figured it was as big as email marketing. Launched a SaaS product. Was a marketing persona person. Given my last few years since say 2008, my stint with the US company I was
Got it.
with my venture fund, and yeah, and then Push Engage was doing phenomenally well. we were getting acquisition offers, uh, and that time I also had a personal journey of mine, which is around spirituality and thinking about what's the meaning of life. And this is something
Hmm.
which I had probably very early in the life when I was maybe in 10th grade onwards. But this was my second stint, if you may, of that. And I was asking the question, what's the purpose? Is it only about maximization of value? And somewhere it was within me, just like I did startup, it somewhere was within me that, hey, I want to do something for the nation. And I had to be in the trenches, not on the sideline by donating or helping. And thus in 2020, again, I think I shared a last episode also a little bit of journey of how to get guidance. I
Hmm.
took guidance and then decided to sell. I sold my company with the move, with a desire to move to the social sector. Again, as divine would have it, very clean, nice exit. And 21 1st January, I was available
Hmm.
to kind of look at social sector. And that's where, I started exploring and then went on to kind of do more things there.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. Um, so Ravi, would want to know a little bit more about the spiritual parallel track that you were talking about, right?
Sure.
Um, I sort of a naive question is, was the switch a hard switch, or did it happen over time? And mostly it is not a hard switch. It doesn't happen
Mhm.
that overnight you think, chalo aaj, let's start devoting our time
Right, right.
to bigger problems. So things must have happened,
Sure.
and small things happen which have a rippling effect, much bigger effect in the future. So are there things
Sure.
that you can trace it to things that happened as you were growing up
So,
and
so
you're
the way I would
thinking? Yeah.
answer is twofold. One is that while we think of spirituality as a parallel track, and now I'm answering a philosophical question, actually, there are
Hmm,
no two lives, there's only one
hmm,
life.
hmm,
Spirituality is the way or the lens at which you look at it. Actually,
hmm,
every action is spiritual in that sense. I'll just
hmm,
pause
hmm.
there, although in the initial phase they seem separate. Coming to your other question, I think
And I
growing
just
up,
wanted to,
yeah,
draw a distinction here. The spirituality that you're talking about is not necessarily the religious spirituality that we're talking about, but more in terms of, philosophical angle of societal issues and societal impact, and what the role of a human is, or a role of a member of society is in that.
yeah. So I think again, so now not to kind of go too deep, I guess, but to some level, I will clarify again spirituality, religion. So there are words, but I think it's the essence of it is that when you are not centered around your own self,
Right.
that is the
Correct.
essence of spirituality. When you are,
Right.
when the center of everything you do is not your own self, when, so that's
Correct.
all it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the moment it flips, that is what it is. So it's nothing to do
Correct.
with practices, rituals. So
Yeah.
it's the
Exactly.
essence everywhere, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
being maybe selfless, if you may, and
Yeah.
I mean just not thinking of the body you are in, right?
Exactly.
Just to kind of trace back, back in maybe teenager, I was reading Swami Vivekananda, influenced by him heavily. That's why you'll see on my LinkedIn also, I have the quote, "They alone live who live for others." So somewhere it was there. I think
Correct.
back in teenager I was practicing, but then as one would get sucked into the corporate life, I think somewhere around I got in HP and I moved abroad, whatever around 2000. After few years post my masters, I probably, wasn't focused on it. But again, in 2015, something happened. I don't know what. I started reading again, some through a connect. I picked up autobiography and yogi. It kind of reminded me of what I had started off, and then those questions around. I guess the bigger question I'm trying to say is, what is the meaning of life? Why am I
Yeah.
living this life? What is the purpose? And that kind of wanted me to say, okay, I want to do what I do, but it's not only for value maximization for myself, but maybe a little bigger. So I was drawing that circle, but with a little bigger. I'm still not there where the circle has whole world in it, but it's
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
little
Hmm.
different. So yeah, so I
Hmm.
think that's where this desire was. And then early on also, even when I went to the US, I kind of knew that I'll come back. That's why I never applied for green card. So that's
Right.
another signal where I had that nahi mujhe karna hai, kuch to karna hai, and I
Hmm. Hmm.
I will come back. So there were some elements, and I took action. Had I,
Are
and I
there
was there.
specific things that you think, specific incidents you think that led you to that, or just, things kept happening and gradually your just
So I
pull
am
was there?
okay. So I'll say I'm a little. I shouldn't say. I don't know. Maybe I'm very stubborn from inside. There are certain things. So I knew I will come back.
Yeah.
And I will
Yeah.
give you an example where it was hard. See, I was an investor, I was a Wall Street investor.
Right.
2008 housing market crashed. Okay.
Hmm.
Amazing price to buy houses. And I will tell
Hmm.
you, I had money in my bank account to
Hmm.
buy, but
Hmm.
I didn't
Hmm.
buy.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
in-law himself was saying, "Arey, you can go buy. It's amazing." I would have made a lot, but I said, the
Yeah.
moment I buy a house in US,
And then you
I'm
planting
going
your
to lose
roots
money.
there.
So why did
Yeah.
I do that in 2008? I can
Yeah.
only say, of course, partly is divine grace, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
also I felt somewhere it was there कि नहीं
Conviction.
मुझे करना है. तो वो
Correct.
एक बार मेरे अंदर एक करंट रहती है कि मुझे एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना है. मे बी आई डोंट डू इट इन
Correct.
फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट सेकंड, मेरे को
Yeah.
टाइम लगता है. सो आई
Right.
स्टार्टेड माय फर्स्ट एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप इन 35. इंडिया के
Hmm.
लिए मुझे शुरू से करना था, बट 18 से सोच के मे बी 39. सो एनीवे, सो आई
Yeah.
वुड से दैट्स द वे आई वुड आंसर. वो कहीं पे इट नैग्स मी टिल आई एक्चुअली टेक एक्शन इज द वे आई वुड से.
Got it. Got it.
So
Got it.
yeah, and then things do
So
happen, right? I do get
yeah.
inspired. So even when I started looking out, and some of the circles you're also familiar, when I started looking out कि social sector
Yeah.
में move करना है,
Yeah.
I was amazed to see the kind of folks I met, and it was all,
Right.
serendipity that I was brought in contact with such people, and it
Right.
inspired me to say, कि यार, I am on the right track, and then do it with full steam. Then getting disenchanted, I guess.
Right, 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 right. Okay, so then let's zoom into the time that you switched. And if I remember right, your first sort of stint, if I may, was the Indian Administrative Fellowship, or IAF for short, that is offered by the Nudge Institute, in which senior professionals from industry take a fellowship of 18 months working with various government departments and basically being attached with secretaries or joint secretaries of departments, working on problems to really look at it from a senior lens. So that I believe was your first stint. So tell us a little bit more about that experience of how you approached that, what that experience was like, and there's a lot of interest,
Sure,
and I feel sometimes there are myths, perceptions
sure, sure.
um,
So let's
about how
maybe.
it is, and so break that all for us.
Sure. So I think let's begin from the beginning. Why did I pick? So firstly, I was in agriculture working with the additional chief secretary or the secretary, the highest secretary, right? That's number one, at a state level in Karnataka. Number two, why did I pick? So one of the reasons, or two reasons. One is government is huge, largest social sector, organization in that sense. And if you were able to even move a 1%, it's huge impact, right?
Right.
Second was this other belief ki we always say कि नहीं गवर्नमेंट में ये सही नहीं है, this is not working, that is not, and
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
always this whole thing कि अच्छा, but what did you do about it? So I wanted to
Yes.
actually live that experience, and this has been
Right.
also my core philosophy. Even as an investor, I've always felt that I need to be an entrepreneur to be a better investor. So for me to be in a social sector, government, agar if I learned and understood, that's the biggest one. I felt I needed to be there, and I thankfully got the opportunity. So that's number one. Now, agree I picked up because agree, and again, is among the top
So
in
tell me
terms
a
of.
little bit more about this whole
Sure.
IAF selection process. So one is the selection process, and I'm guessing that must have been seeing it on LinkedIn or someplace, and then applying, and then
Correct, correct.
screening. All of that is there. But do you have a choice on which department you
Yes,
picked?
yes, that's correct. So while
Okay,
we applied, we had
right.
to pick two or three. So my
Hmm.
choices were, and I think in the last episode also I hinted at, were agriculture,
Uh-huh.
education, and
I see.
e-governance. And I think last one we spoke
Got
on
it.
education. So
Right.
agree I picked because I knew two things. One, it was AI in Agri, what they were looking for, which was technology in Agri, how to use it
Hmm.
to kind of
Hmm.
leapfrog Agri, which is where
Hmm.
I wanted to be, which was where one of
Hmm.
my strengths was. But more
Hmm.
importantly for me, Agri was the sector to be. Why? 60% labor force
Yeah.
employed by agriculture. If you look at the marginal, the most poorest, that's the sector.
Right.
This is where there are tough challenges. I mean, you look at it, it's the toughest sector in terms of, making impact so much. I mean, so many factors, like so much government involvement in input, you name it, right? It's a tough sector. And I felt for somebody like me, this is where I wanted to pick a tough problem, let's put it. And this is also my, say, venture mindset. Okay, pick a
Yeah.
big problem, tough problem,
Right. Right.
and
So
then
how
make
did
them.
that experience go over 18 months, and break some of the myths
Sure.
that, or maybe the things that you went in fearing or
Sure. So,
anticipating, and they were proven wrong, and some things that you went in
right.
with that were delightfully positively proven either right or
Yeah, so I
change your
think
perception. Yeah.
what you're asking is a very brief thing. I'll maybe take a little longish version.
Sure.
What I'll say is, first is, see, this was the first batch. this
Hmm.
lateral kind of a program that to
Hmm.
put by a non-profit together with the government, the
Hmm.
first of unique. So we were kind of the guinea pigs, if you may. But of course, we were
Hmm.
in peak of COVID. There was a lot of desire from both
Hmm.
sides to work with each other. That's one thing I
Hmm.
have to say.
Hmm.
But having said that, it's still you see you're like a consultant within there. You
Hmm.
have access, is the way I will say. You have access to the right folks, but you have no power or very little power because you don't have the
I
file
see.
power, as you say, right? The moment you
Hmm.
have signing power, you can actually make things happen. Here you are more
Hmm.
consulting. So that's the
Hmm.
pro and con, but you're sitting right at the top. You can influence. Now the thing with the state is, and this we realized is the state is more, and agree is a state subject. What do I mean? Federal level policies get made, but execution is at state. At
Hmm.
a state level bureaucracy and state level functionality, a lot of it is less policy but more around execution. Whereas
Hmm.
if we go to a central ministry and work there, which again some of
Over
our
there,
peers
it is
have,
more
it's more
policy. I
policy.
see.
So that's so the
Hmm.
moment you get into execution, improvement in schemes, you need to know more on the grassroots, right?
Hmm.
And it takes a little longer to learn. But those are all the aspects of it, but there's still policy to be there. So what I'll say is I'll begin by on the myth question. First is it was in some sense very hard in the sense of both sides to figure out ki, who am I, what am
Hmm.
I.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
though
Hmm.
the guy
So
who
you've been airdropped into this new terrain,
हाँ,
and you have to figure out. You have to
एग्ज़ैक्टली
figure out the terrain. They have to
हाँ,
figure out ये कौन आ गया, किससे
ये
कैसे
क्या
हो
है?
रहा है
या
क्या.
एग्ज़ैक्टली
हाँ.
एंड देन इवन द गाय वो जो पार्किंग वाला वो पूछ रहा है सर आपका डेज़िग्नेशन क्या है? क्योंकि उनको तो वही
हाँ.
पता है, यार ये
Correct.
जॉइंट डायरेक्टर है कि डायरेक्टर बिकॉज़ उस तरह से आपको वो रिस्पेक्ट देंगे। वहाँ रूम्स भी,
Correct.
चाय भी सब कुछ उस लेवल पे आपको चाय कौन से
हाँ.
कप में मिल रही है उस पे भी फ़र्क पड़ता है, राइट? सो इट्स ऑल
Got it.
so very hierarchical. But anyway, so that was one. But what happened was we came in with the right intent. We told the story many times. They understood this somebody on deputation wanting to make an impact. The other thing which helped me was my white hair, of course. क्योंकि कम से
Hmm.
कम उसको रिस्पेक्ट तो आती है ना ना इट्स फैक्ट इफ यू आर विद अ
No,
ब्लैक
this is
हेयर
so
लाइक
true.
एक
This
बहुत
is so
बच्चा आ
true.
गया who's the hell I mean at least it
Yeah.
appears कि there is a guy who has probably
Yeah.
20, 30 years which is good I mean
Yeah. Yeah.
and so at least so the thing is I worked with the secretary but for all practical purposes the action was with the commissioner so
I
he
see.
delegated me to the commissioner of agriculture who by the way had interviewed me and he was doing all the ground action secretary may be hota hai, but mostly the commissioner so I used to
Yeah.
interact regularly so the highlights the way I would summarize is I actually went through three different secretaries because this is the
Okay.
nature of bureaucracy in India.
Hmm.
One of
Hmm. Hmm.
my fellows went through 10 and one went through only
Hmm.
one. So you can go through
Hmm.
both sides.
Hmm.
It has its own pros and cons. So three
Hmm.
secretaries mean some things might have restarted and I might have
Hmm.
to redo. That's number one. But what I found was there is amazing level of talent in mid to lower levels who is
Hmm.
very dedicated, which is
Hmm.
kind of running the department. Number two, government can seem very slow, but when it wants to do something, it's much faster than the private sector because it has immense amount of resources at this
Much
disposal.
faster than the private
Yeah,
sector when it
because
wants
the
to be.
resources, yeah, resources. I mean, if I want to dig something in one day, I mean, it's just the amount of resources and the focus it can
Hmm.
bring to. Let's say there is a PM who mandates कि यहाँ ये होना है, and
Hmm.
then they align the machinery. That's it. So I know that, and so that's where the question is like what you're picking up. So then
Hmm.
we realized we were going in with "अच्छा, ये solve करेंगे. So we also have to look at something which is the intersection of what the state really wants to solve
Hmm.
which is what we as a development organization so this is where we kind of became more and in some cases I may be happy to do something which is very mundane and it doesn't matter but I'm helping the person to build
Hmm.
credibility
Hmm.
etc so I
Hmm.
would say
Hmm.
the highlights were two three highlights first was agri policy we were doing in Karnataka
Hmm.
uh, this was again at the end of my stint, though. But we were making agri policy for Karnataka. Over time, I was able to get enough credibility that in the end, I was leading that with my secretary and in present in front of maybe because agri is an allied department. There are maybe in front of 15 other secretaries and chief secretary present for the department. That's one. But the bigger one, I guess, which I spent a lot of time was this AI innovation cell. So let me talk about it. So I was
Well,
brought
so
into
so just before we do that, just wanted to also, because we'll talk about the agriculture and AI part, and that's there's a lot to talk about there. Um, what do you think is the future based on how that whole thing uh, went through with the 18 months, and now I know they've been more fellows, more cohorts after that. And I'm assuming this is an idea that's not just one institute doing it. There's others probably that are
right,
thinking of it
right.
as well. What do you think is the future of one, working with government, but more, I think, from your personal experience that you switched to the social sector. What is some advice that you would give to people when they are in that phase where you were, let's say 2015, 2016, 3 4 years before you made the final switch, and in 2020 when you knew that you were on the cusp of it? What are some of the things to be to think through, to plan for, to prepare for, um,
Sure.
and how
No,
should they approach it?
yeah, so I think I also did one of the course called India Leader for Social Sector. The reason I bring it up is,
ILSS, yeah.
see, when you are thinking of moving to a different sector, and this is not new in the sense for me because I have switched from being, I guess, a software guy to being a pre-sales guy, from pre-sales post MBA to Wall Street, from Wall Street to venture. So every switch has its method. In some sense, you have to stand back in line, be humble, ready to learn. So it always is that, right? Number one.
Right,
What I've
right.
also learned is in this switch again, because you're moving across the type, so for
Yeah,
you to have either a problem that you're passionate about, which is either
yeah, yeah.
education, is very important, right?
Right.
Or having a horizontal skill that anybody can use. Like
Yeah,
you may be a great sales guy, amazing for fundraising. Anyone can use fundraising, right? That's one. The other is, so ideally, either you pick a horizontal or pick a vertical,
I
or
think that's a
ideally
very
pick.
interesting point that you mentioned, and that, that's sort of something that I've lived and experienced myself as well. So either you pick a problem area that you're passionate about and then go deep into that, because
Right,
then you can really learn a lot, contribute a lot. Or maybe even if you are, but if you have horizontal skills, there's a big need for talent on the horizontal skills area,
right,
because NGO founders and the teams that they have, they can go deep in the program. Of
right,
course, if you can make it efficient, great. But there's a
right,
lot of need for horizontal skills, be it finance, be it
right.
marketing, be it
Correct.
systems, be it technology, be it partnerships,
Right.
fundraising, sales. So that's a thank you for
Yeah, and
mentioning
the
that. That's a
second I
very
was
good
going to
point.
say was, and there are some obvious gaps. So the first part, just to complete the thought, is, and then to do this, you got to figure it out. So which sector? So you'll have to maybe go experience. So how do you experience? Either donate and volunteer, or only volunteer. That's the way. So this is what I tell all the
Wonderful.
ILSS and other folks, right? That's how you kind of figure out. See, you have to only try and then know. Like, why do we do internship? To know if this career is for me. So
Yeah.
go and volunteer. You see whether it works or not, right? And then in 2 3 years, you can try many things and figure out what works. But the second point I want to make was, as you are in the social sector, you realize there are big gaps, and this I want to highlight. There's a huge gap in terms of technology talent. And why is that? If you think about it, you'll find those gaps. So if you're a technologist listening to it, there's a huge opportunity for you. Why? Because most tech folks, very high salaries, huge demand, right? I'm talking of folks who are programming, etc.
Yeah.
Now, in the social sector, you still have the same need for software. Your
Yeah.
ability to pay is less. Now,
Yeah.
the audience you're serving, actually, your software has to be even more mature. This is what I learned from Deshpande. He said, you know what? You can't try an MVP with a farmer, because you just can't, because you can't afford. He can't afford. He's not a. So the thing is, your cost of is higher. So this is where I guess you can clearly see big gap. So if you're a
Beautiful.
technologist with a
Yeah.
heart in social sector, amazing. I bet you will get chased like anything. You want to be CTO of an org, amazing. So many issues, from security to scale, I see they are like fundamental, or should I say, basic issues as a SaaS startup, even an average startup would do, which I see. So this is one gap I can see. The other one I would
Hmm.
say is finance. I saw one post from one of my colleagues saying, hey, domain में expert तो फिर भी मिल रहे हैं, because there are some people in the domain, but
Yeah.
finance, right? So these are some of those
Correct.
horizontal, I know. Tech, I mean, top of my mind, huge,
Correct.
right? So now
Correct.
you layer this thing. That is why my AI stuff I was going to get to.
Right.
AI guy, आज की date में, who will be in the social sector? That's the other thing I'm saying. Not
Yeah.
saying that
Yeah.
because of that I came here, but
Right. Right.
AI guys will chase the chat GPTs of the large corporates, right? But this is a
So
huge impact that you can make.
so interesting that you bring up the AI part, and maybe I think, thank you again for highlighting these, um, sort of a pathway and the thought process that anyone looking to or is on the fence about moving to the social sector should pursue. And I think these are some great sort of models and framework to apply. Now that you've mentioned AI, while we were talking about AI from the talent perspective, I just want to use that opportunity to move into a totally different orbit of the impact of AI on society, specifically the society that, or the communities that nonprofits serve.
Mm, mm,
Um, And then let's talk about the more vulnerable groups where there's the inequity part, be it livelihood problems or poverty problems, or in just in case of the tectonic shift that it can bring in the future years. So what do you see are, again, the dangers, and also the opportunities
Right.
of AI on development?
So I would begin with the opportunities,
Hmm.
because sometimes I feel the dangers are overstated. So let's begin with opportunity. Let's even figure out even there is an opportunity or not. So there are two ways
Sure.
to answer. I'll first
Sure.
answer in a generic technology or a DPG or digital public good language.
Sure.
So we know for a fact that there have been certain large revolutions due to whether it is in inclusion or banking. And I'm
Hmm.
talking about Aadhaar and UPI.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, Aadhaar brought about inclusion, more efficient scheme. It's a very foundational layer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So very hard to do, but such foundational layer technology can actually fundamentally alter the kind of the schemes, so if you think around those aspect is what I'll begin with, right? Now if I take the same and say on the AI side and say, okay, what are those similar fundamentals, and this is a problem which I've been thinking for last few years on in AI that can solve. So I will say this: if you can build things that help the small and marginal farmer. So in India, around 89% are small and marginal farmer. We know that they don't have the ability to pay because of the nature they are. So if a government, for example, can take as the AI solution, which actually, let's say, solves for a problem. For example, it solves for pest surveillance or pest detection, because pest is a big problem. Pest is leads to 30% crop loss. Some loss will still be there. It's a good thing for biodiversity also. Zero pest is not what we advocate, but can we reduce to say 10%? So the thing is, pest surveillance as a digital good where you provide that as a service to everybody is an example of an AI revolution that can help even small and marginal. This still not happened. So, and we'll talk about it. What I want to say is that such examples of horizontal large layer things where you make it a public good is what actually will move. Now this is where
Hmm.
we also came up with our second model, which is to say that because the small and marginal farmers cannot pay, can government be the payer at scale? And this is
Hmm.
where this model of what is known as AI innovation cell, which we started in Karnataka, part of my
Hmm.
IF journey.
Hmm.
Also, this is the model which some more orgs have tried in different names, like World Economic Forum in Telangana, IFC in UP. So I have seen this in 3 4 states. But that's the similar model, which is to say I have AI innovation, amazing stuff. How does it reach grassroots? I need to pilot it with the government infra, show them the value, measure the impact, and if they see the impact and measure the value and integrate with the, let's say, the data stack with the, let's say, the government has, they call the agri stack, where you can now disseminate targeted advisory to a farmer because you have that database. You're giving so many schemes. I can do the surveillance. No, I'm just to kind of keep it simple. A
Yeah.
surveillance using remote sensing or a drone based, and then you distribute this. Otherwise today the pest surveillance is usually using the individual farmer. So that's an
Hmm.
example of where you can have a
So,
disruptive
so
effect.
it's an excellent, I think, idea in terms of like the digital public goods you talked about. And I think what I'm drawing from your example is there are very specific problem areas which require a deep sort of investment and leveraging of technology to really implement it at a massive scale.
Yes,
And AI is that enabler that can actually make it happen at a massive scale.
yes, that's correct.
What it requires, however, is that government sort of
Yes,
will to do that. And coming back to what you pointed out in the IAF section, if the
correct.
government wants to,
Yes.
they can make it happen. Where do you think is that, again, optimism or danger, that the bus sorts of we miss the bus, and it
See,
because of
see
either lack of will or whatever, that we're not able to really tap into that power?
Yeah, so there are two ways to answer that question, and we actually have had many, I guess, conferences or workshops on this topic. In fact, just 2 days back, and it'll be there in our annual charcha. What I was going to say was there are two aspects. One around the danger. One is around that the adoption never happens of AI,
Hmm.
and the adoption for AI never happens because government doesn't participate. That's one
Hmm.
aspect, to it, like we
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
discussing.
Hmm.
Because some of the adoption can happen at a grassroots farmer level, but it's hard. We have seen that, right? So that's one absolutely valid point and has to be well integrated, right? The other danger, now switching slightly different, is, and which people talk about, is like, is the farmer have agency? Is this localized enough? So, and this is more for the generative AI piece, which is your Gen AI models are being, what should I say, trained on I will call value system,
Hmm.
which is Western, or
Hmm.
value
Yeah.
system, which is a non-localized data set.
Right.
Now, if I
Right.
use the same Chat GPT 3.5 plus to train, what happens is amazing, very quick prototype. But does
But
it
based
apply
on
in the
data
local
sets which
context?
are non-inclusive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Correct.
so does it apply to the local context? And I can
Correct.
always say कि देखो मेरा एक bias है, and I'll be open. Let's say bias meaning my inclination. Let's say I'm a male. This I want these values. These are my values.
Yeah.
जब मुझे
Yeah.
कोई advice करे, it's like the risk profile of you when your
Yeah.
chartered whatever financial advisor advises you. He says तुम्हारा
Hmm.
risk profile क्या है, तब मैं तुमको
Correct.
advice करूंगा.
Correct.
I as a farmer can say मेरा risk profile ये है कि I want to do organic farming. I want to do natural farming. Now, you as a chat GPT should not throw me in a chemical inside it knowing my values, right? That's a
Correct.
value. I'm
Correct.
talking
Or a
very
or a or
fundamental.
a temperate climate when I'm talking about
Yes.
tropical climate and things
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I mean, I think very
So that's
valid
exactly the
point out is
point.
the
Yeah.
data infusion or the context in which these Gen AI models are
Yeah. And then the,
operating seems to be biased or
yeah.
tilted towards the Western
So that is
or
what,
that global North. Yeah.
but when I speak to, and I mean, we have partnered with Vadvani AI in many years, I mean, right now also. So when we speak to folks like them who are actually practicing and we actually piloted some of their solutions, what I find is the second stuff is less of a worry right now. This is what
Acha.
we were discussing just 2 days back.
Acha.
What हम क्या कह रहे थे कि यार एआई का adoption तो हो जाए. If you go and look at the digital agri का adoption data in India,
Yeah.
I looked at one survey, 3.5-4% है यार. So what are we talking about? So there is too much of
Hmm.
hype. There are some pockets where a
Hmm.
deep impact has happened.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now one is the government. The other way it can actually happen is if the buyer of the commodity
From
has
the
a deep
bottom up.
incentive.
Yeah.
तो
Yeah.
वो जैसे मैं बोलूँगा चिली है, या I'll give you another one, MRL rice.
Hmm.
मैं मिनिमल रेजिड्यू राइस एक्सपोर्ट करता हूँ बासमती, एंड आई एम लेट्स से द ओलाम्स और अ लार्ज ट्रेड हाउस ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. मेरा इंसेंटिव है कि मुझे वो प्रोड्यूस ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्वांटिटी में मिले एट द राइट क्वालिटी.
Hmm.
आई विल इन्वेस्ट इन द वैल्यू चेन. आई विल पुट द ट्रेसेबिलिटी सॉफ्टवेयर.
Hmm.
I will put the investment in the value chain. So this is on the agri side. So wherever the innovation has happened, either the government thing or the buyer of the commodity has to fund that innovation. In that case, all of it reaches the value chain is what I want to say. Otherwise, point solution में there's a lot of noise, lot of talk, but वो reach नहीं
Hmm.
करते. So to me, an AI का भी सबसे बड़ा risk ये है कि amazing potential,
Hmm.
if it doesn't get integrated right way, either
Hmm.
through these channels and the right, and this is where we see the bigger gap. Because if you
Hmm.
ask me, बहुत solutions बन चुके हैं. There
Hmm.
isn't a need to do one more big solution, but उनको grassroots पे, and this is where our whole model of what AI innovation cell, which I come back to again, is
Hmm.
enough money gone in, enough solutions in, can we take it to the farmer and
Got it.
get the benefit to them? So I just
Got it.
pause there,
So
but I
that
guess
sort
the
of,
danger is
yeah.
too much adoption and
Yeah, no, so I
agent.
think that sort of brings it all beautifully together. When I started out, I mentioned your experience on the agricultural value chain, your experience with AI, your experience working with the government. So I think we've been able to cover and really draw out a lot of insights from there. So to wrap up, what I would love to hear from you is maybe a little bit on the same thread, uh, but to draw out where with the big sort of trends we are seeing in front of ourselves, right? AI की हमने बात कर ली. There's climate change. There's also the robotics angle to it, right? How warehouses or new manufacturing plants that are set up don't really have a lot of need for labor, right? Because they're so automated. So when you combine the ability of AI to really think in a way, robotics to be able to work physical labor in a way, and then the vulnerability because of what climate change is going to be, but also the inequities. Where do you think when combine all of these? What is your sort of hope, aspiration, and sometimes also fears for the future, and how the combination of these different trends that are coming up can really impact our future and the next generations?
Yeah, so I'm, by the way, not a great crystal ball guy, but I'll try to share some of my thoughts.
Sure.
Yeah, and I guess what I will say is, see, climate, and what I know I will say with conviction, climate change is real.
Yeah.
We are seeing it.
Yeah.
We are seeing the impact on the field with farmer as well.
Hmm.
It's here to stay. How does farmer quickly move to climate resilient agriculture practice? That's, by the way, also my focus of the work I've been doing at Nudge, was doing at Nudge. How do you switch farmer to those climate resilient? It's a tough transition ahead of us, right? That's one big work, right? AI has a role in it, other technologies have. So that's one big aspect. How do you get farmer to be more resilient, right? That's one big
Basically,
aspect.
climate resilient agricultural
Yes, both
practices
mitigation and
and framework.
adoption,
Sure.
right? That's one. And again, one can go into very specifics. We have spent a lot of time in that, right? The second is, yeah, there is automation that's going to happen. It's actually good in some sense. I think it takes away some of the inefficiencies. It takes away, some hard menial jobs. It's okay, I guess. When it comes to if you look at farming in India, a lot of farmers are complaining lack of labor because the labor is moving to factories, labor is moving to
Hmm.
next level. So
Hmm.
it's totally
Hmm. Hmm.
fine if there is robotics. I'm not so worried of it. In fact,
Hmm.
that's what the Indian agriculture needs. It needs more efficiencies, right?
Hmm.
Both from
Hmm.
automation. We are among the least automated. We need more automation. We need more of it. I would rather have this labor be employed. Actually, again, we know this. Like there has to be labor that has to come out of farming. So if you look at any developed country from a top down, as they become developed, the labor for force participation in agriculture goes down.
Yeah.
So only 5%, I guess, in the US, which take care of so much. So it's inevitable. We don't need 60, 70% people. They have to come out. What do they do? They do factories. So I think it's fine. So it's totally fine. I think automation is fine. Now, if you ask me, what do I fear? Yeah, we all fear the job loss. And I think the job loss I fear more so, forget the, I guess, this sector. I forget more of the, I guess, the software programmers of the world,
Yeah.
which I
Correct.
think will have even tougher time. It's not a
Yeah.
agree thing I'm bringing it to,
Yeah.
but I think the
No,
bigger
I mean,
risk
and
is
I wanted to,
IT
sort of
service.
expand our view,
Yeah.
not just the agri part, but in general. And I totally
Yes.
agree.
So I feel the
Programmers.
IT
Yeah.
services company who are
Yeah.
service driven,
Yeah.
some of them, because now the AI is like a service, it's more of a, yeah, I mean, it's like doing a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's completely disruptive.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you look at this creative industry, right? Images, videos, you look at
Yeah.
that, right? It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And today we already know that. So that's where, but the way to think of it is, if you ask me, just like an investor, when
Right.
everybody is fearsome, that's where you have to spot the opportunity.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
can look,
Hmm.
and again, not saying that I've done it many times, but I can tell you this is the right time to get into AI training. I see left, right, and center AI training being
Hmm.
offered.
Yeah. 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 That is true.
So just to kind of dovetail into last podcast, we spoke about the BCA course we launched. We made sure there are three topics. We got prompt engineering inside that as a topic
Hmm.
today,
As a topic.
because we
Yeah.
know prompt engineering is going to be big tomorrow.
Yeah.
It may not sound cool, but you being able to get work done through a GPT or some agent is a
Correct.
huge thing. Is going to become
Yeah.
important. So I'm just
Absolutely. And
saying.
that
So
makes the
get
that
future ready.
that makes a big difference in how you're actually able to leverage. These are machines, right? You need to know how to run these machines
Exactly.
and
And I will
really
say
get
I'm
the
very
power out
glad,
of them.
and
Yeah.
I'm very glad that and this again is another thing, maybe it surprises people, that the government is on top of it. I mean, there is a education committee which was formed at the central government. I was
Nice.
part of it through a professor who was the head of it. He included
Right.
me in consulting. I know they're already thinking about exactly all the IITs, IIScs
Yeah.
on what curriculum change should I do next year
Yeah.
to
So
make
I
sure I
think,
am.
I think so.
So
What
there
I'm
is
gathering
traction
from
on
all
it.
of this, yeah,
Yeah,
is there, as we know, there's a lot of power in all of these different technologies. There's, of course, these changes happening, but adapting to these changes, be it climate, be it AI, be it robotics, and being well equipped, well trained
right,
to take advantage of these changes coming up, and so therefore be able to really leverage them to make it even more powerful for yourself and for society, rather than fearing them and trying to
correct.
resist them. And I think that's really the gist, and I think you brought it up beautifully. Well, thank you so much, Ravi. It has again been a delight, and learned so much from your journey, took inspiration, and also learned so much about government, working with government, working with AI in agriculture, and also the trends for the future. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.